All right, welcome everybody to our case study about AAA partnerships. We've got an awesome partnership to feature today out of South Carolina with our member Rebuild Upstate and one of their longtime partners, the South Carolina Appalachian Council of Governments. And I'm going to have Dayle and Tim just go ahead and introduce themselves briefly. Dayle, you can start.
I'm keeping myself muted because I have dogs in my house and I don't want their noise to disturb anyone. I'm Dayle Stewart. I am the grant writer for Rebuild Upstate and have had the wonderful privilege of working with Tim Womack for almost 8.5 years now.
And I'm Tim Womack. And first off, let me thank you for the honor. You all acknowledged our partnership with Rebuild Upstate, and I feel like I should be given the award out to Rebuild Upstate for all they do for our senior community. So I am the AAA director, the Aging Services Director at the South Carolina Appalachian Council of Governments.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. And we are going to be hearing from them both in a couple minutes. I know you're all here, so you must have some understanding of what a AAA is and how it's important to home repair. But I just want to set the scene today. So an area agency on aging is sort of what we mean when we say AAA, and they coordinate services to help older adults age in their homes and age healthily in their communities. They can be public or a private nonprofit agency. The state designates AAAs to address needs and concerns of older adults at regional and local levels. So AAA is a general name. Names of local AAAs will vary. So we've seen here, we have the South Carolina Council of Governments, Appalachian Council of Governments, and they serve a designated service area, which could be a town, county, or a group of counties. So if you are curious about your AAA, there's this link down here. If you just search, if you Google, if you're curious right now, find my area agency on aging, it should pop up. And I recommend searching by city and state, not by zip code. When I pulled it up earlier, I wasn't able to get the zip code to work. But that's how you can find your AAA if you're not already familiar with them or already have a partnership. And so what do AAAs do? Well, we're here, one, because we know they support home repair, which is important, but they also do a lot of other things. So they're coordinating and offering services that help older adults remain in their homes, which will include those home repair and aging in place modifications. They also will support meals, meal delivery with Meals on Wheels or other services, advocacy, maybe even getting people to and from doctor's appointments. And ultimately, AAAs are going to allow older individuals to choose the services and living arrangements that are going to suit them best. I have a few key partnership highlights, and then we'll move into some Q&A. So over almost 2 million, it may exceed 2 million at this point, have been invested through this partnership. 2.3, Dayle, thank you. Well, that's wonderful. And it's no surprise with some other large numbers here, with over 2,000 older adults served through that 2.3 million. And they've worked alongside over 9,000 volunteers to help stretch those dollars. We'll hear about a lot of this more in detail, but this does operate on a contract style grant reimbursement. The partnership started in 2012. Repairs and modifications for these funds must be safety focused, age 60 and up. You can use volunteers because we all know sometimes our funders do not let us use volunteers, but with these you can. And then the current dollar amount per home is actually $10,000, which I feel like is pretty high for a lot of the funding sources that we hear. And they can be layered with other funding sources. And so the AAA in this case must pre-approve applicants before any repairs can begin, but the applicants can contact either organization to begin the process. If they contact Rebuild Upstate, then we'll just get them in touch with who they need to get in touch with. So again, we're going to hear about this all in depth. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and pull up my list of questions. But Tim, you are going to be in the hot seat first.
I'm ready.
He's ready. All right. So Tim, we said, we started in 2012. Can you take us back to that time? How did this partnership begin?
Okay. So I love New Orleans, Louisiana. So I heard of this group called Rowego Ministries. That was their first name. They were going down to New Orleans to help rebuild after Hurricane Katrina. And I read in our papers in South Carolina that they started doing projects in our own backyard. So I contacted Rowego Ministries and said, hey, we get calls from seniors needing ramps to get in and out of their home, grab bars to get in and out of their tubs. So it started very small. I believe our limit back then was, I think, $1,500, and we were just paying for materials back then. And we had a lower threshold. We were serving those households that were 125% of poverty. And since then, we've gone up to 200% of poverty. And as you said earlier, our limit now is $10,000 per household.
Thanks for that's wild to see how it has really evolved over time. And I think that's the mark of, true partnership. Can you tell us more about your AAA and maybe your goals in the upstate, and how home repair fits into those broader goals?
So AAAs began through the Older Americans Act, which President Johnson passed in 1965. The Older Americans Act has been reauthorized bipartisanly since then until this current year. Um, and the mission of AAAs are to keep seniors at home where they want to reside and active in their communities. So we provide transportation to doctor's appointments, to the senior centers, home delivered meals, home care where we bathe people or help clean their homes. Um, and back in 2012, the conversation, started with Rowego Ministries about putting ramps in, because if someone can't get in or out of their home, well, they're probably going to end up in a facility. So we we partner with many organizations in the upstate, and Rebuild is one of our dearest and longtime partners.
Awesome. Thank you. Can you share? I know you mentioned about there is federal funding, we know, through this Older Americans Act and how it was founded. How does your funding look today? Is it state, federal, a combination? And then how does that affect how your AAA decides to redistribute it? So I guess where is that funding coming from? And then how are you deciding where to send it back out?
So everyone in the United States is represented by a AAA. So we all get federal funding through the Older Americans Act, and it's up to each individual state to determine how much state funds they're given. So we in South Carolina, we're not able to use federal funds for this program. We strictly use state dollars. They're more unrestrictive and a lot of gray area, which we like. So when Dayle and her team call us and, they run into an issue while they're maybe putting up a ramp, we can talk and change. We may go a little above the 10,000 if there's unforeseen challenges with whatever project it is. We most of the time just strictly stick with safety related issues. So, but if someone's cabinets are about to fall in on them in their kitchen, well, we may have to make an exception for that. If we see that a project may be covered by weatherization, well, we let those organizations handle that. So we stretch our dollars to where we're not duplicating what any other organization may do.
Awesome. Here's some of my other questions here. So if an organization is looking to partner with their AAA, maybe their AAA is already investing in home repair, maybe they're not, but what can you share about more broadly in AAAs? How do they choose to invest in home repair? What can an organization do to start a conversation with a AAA if their AAA is not investing in home repair currently?
Okay. Well, the feds mandate that we have to do a needs assessment every 4 years. A needs assessment we distribute to anywhere we can, to churches, senior centers, caregivers, doctors' offices. We want the community to tell us what they need. So since I've been in this position, we've done 4 needs assessment. And I can tell you, and plus my colleagues across the state, and my friends in North Carolina, Georgia, they all have to do these needs assessments. And near the top of every list, no matter where you are, is like home repair. Seniors live on a limited income and they may not be able to afford to put that ramp in themselves or do the tub shower conversion. They may get to a point where they can't lift their leg over a tub, and that is a safety issue. So that's something that we started doing a few years ago, um, the conversions.
And that your comment makes me sort of recall some data we've seen recently coming out about the increase of cost burdens, and particularly how older adults are most affected, even if they have a fully paid mortgage. We're seeing taxes go up. We're seeing healthcare, all of the other associated housing need costs, utility bills, rising. And so we just saw, I don't have it top of hand, but Harvard Center for Joint Housing Studies produced a report in the past month or two about the increase of housing cost burdens. How does some of this rising data that we're seeing match up with what you're hearing when you see something like that needs assessment? Are you seeing that be the same in South Carolina?
Yes, well, we are in constant communication with Dale's team at Rebuild Upstate. So as costs rise, we've increased our threshold several times during our partnership. It's much more expensive now, where 13, 14 years ago, a ramp may have cost us $1,000. Well, $1,000 won't do a quarter of a ramp anymore. So we've had to raise those thresholds, but we look at all of that each year to determine our unit cost and how we pay our providers. So.
And that leads me to sort of this next question, which is other ways to partner. We've talked a lot about funding, which we've seen evolve over time based on community needs. What are non-funding ways that an organization can partner with their AAA right now?
There are volunteer opportunities at our offices and with the dozen partners that we have in the community. um, through our ombudsman department where we go into nursing homes. Our meal delivery system, there are volunteer opportunities. With Rebuild Upstate, there are volunteer opportunities. But what I speak about most, we need advocacy, because right now, this is the first year that the Older Americans Act has not been reauthorized. So we're looking at a funding crisis. We've only received half of our federal funding that we received last year. So we're having to look at using state dollars to fill in those gaps. So I'm hoping that that will not affect our partnership with Rebuild Upstate and others where we have to use strictly state funding. So that's
Yeah, it's definitely something I think a lot of our partner organizations and members are feeling across the country is sort of the shift in funding and questioning and how important it is to have strong relationships with partners right now as well.
And I
What
would
is a
add, I would
yeah,
add that advocating for the Older Americans Act is something that, whether or not you are partnering with a AAA, is going to benefit the constituents that we serve as organizations that do home repair. So there's no loss there. I mean, it is a win-win situation to do that advocacy work.
absolutely. And I think Emma on our team, who does a lot of advocacy, has some stuff in the works on that for next month. If y'all don't know, May is Older Americans Month. And so this, we're sort of hoping to have a lot of these resources, this recording and this write-up to share next month to elevate the importance of home repair and the work of our members. Tim, I'm going to look through some of our questions here and just keep an eye on time. What is a piece of advice that you would give to a home repair organization who wants to start or strengthen a relationship with their AAA?
If you've never talked with your AAA director before or any of their staff members, go to their office and see if there is a need in their region. And I can guarantee the need is there as long as the funding is there. So right now, I cover a 6-county region, and we are so fortunate that Rebuild Upstate covers 4 of those counties. The 2 other counties, it's hard for us to get a program started. We've encouraged those councils on aging in those 2 counties, hire a contractor. I know that the cost will be more because you're having to pay labor cost on top of the material cost, but everybody needs every community needs this help, because there are those in the community that cannot afford to fix soft flooring or a leaky roof. And to if the roof is too far gone and Dell's team call me, we may have to pair our funding with other pots of funding that they have to replace the entire roof. So I think anyone that is interested in doing this type of work should reach out to their AAA director. Everybody in the United States is covered by one of our offices, so start the conversation.
Thank you, Tim. I want to shift our questions a little bit into more of the nuts and bolts of how the partnership might look day in and day out when it comes to actually getting repairs. And so these questions are for both of you, either or whoever feels, because you each have a perspective to share. So can you share, how does, you have somebody who is interested in home repairs, what happens next?
You mean a contractor?
A contractor, or let's say there's an older adult who just wants to receive a ramp or a home assessment, what happens? Somebody contacts the AAA, and then what it happens to get the ball rolling before eventually volunteers show up on site, however long later.
So we are regional government. So we have to follow federal and state guidelines. So for an organization to partner with us, we have to go out for procurement every 4 to 5 years. And it's 1-year contracts with the option to renew. So we can't just point at some person or organization and say we want to work with you. There's a process they have to go through. So they need to have that conversation with their AAA director. You know, for a client that needs that help, anyone 60 and over, for whatever they may need, we want them to call our office. We are the senior resource center for the community. So even if we may not provide said service, we should know in the community who may be able to help with whatever they need. Now, there's many times where a client may not know who we are. They may call Rebuild Upstate, and our teams work together, you know, with referrals. So they can refer to our office. We can do, for any of our tangible services, we have to do an assessment on that client. Make sure that they're a homeowner, to make sure they're 60 plus, make sure that that is their residence that we're fixing. So, but they reach out to any AAA or the organization that's doing that service in your community.
Can you share a little bit more about what that procurement process might look like for an organization who's never gone through that before? What might they expect?
Okay. So for all of our service providers, we have to put out an RFP, request for proposals. At least some AAAs do it every 4 years. We do it every 5. So we get proposals turned into us. The provider tells us how they will serve the community, at what price they'll serve the community. And so we've got a team, a procurement team, that will go through every proposal and pick whatever's feasible for our office. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. I think it for a lot of our members who might have contracts with their local municipalities, it's probably a very similar process, but it ultimately ends up with a contract. Dayle, what would you add?
I was just going to add that Tim does a great job of setting up the RFP so that it tells you exactly what you need to provide in the application packet. It doesn't leave a lot of questions, but if you do end up having a question, they've been wonderful to work with as far as reaching out and just saying, hey, can you give me a little bit more clarity around this requirement? And they will define that for you in a way that makes it pretty easy to submit the application.
Awesome. Dayle, you know, we've seen how this partnership has evolved over time. In your opinion, what readiness indicators do you think an organization would need to have before they would pursue this partnership for, you know, a financial contract? What do you think a team should be able to implement, or tell us in your perspective, what should somebody really make sure they're prioritizing before they dive in?
Well, in our case as an organization, when we started doing work with the Appalachian Council of Governments funding, we had one full-time employee. So it's not really a case of having to have a huge staff. It's having the ability and the capacity, whether it's through staffing or volunteers, to be able to complete projects. Definitely, you don't want to oversell what you are capable of doing. we are much more along the lines of, under promise and over deliver, because that establishes a very positive relationship up front. When we first started doing this work, it pretty much was just ramps. And, we were already serving elderly homeowners that were low income. So it was just a natural fit for us. And I believe that that would be the case for most of the organizations that are members of the coalition. The other piece of it is, just like many contract grants, this is a reimbursement grant. So having the ability to float the funds until they are able to reimburse you for the work is really important. In the case of Rebuild Upstate, a couple of years ago, we were incredibly fortunate to find a family foundation that was interested in and willing to provide us with what we will affectionately call a cash flow grant. They basically gave us a grant of $150,000 that we have sitting in a bank account, and we draw money off of that as we are making expenditures, and then we reimburse that account when the funds get paid back to us by various contract grantors. That has made it really easy for us to increase the amount of work that we are able to do in the course of a given month, without having a significant financial burden and loss of cash flow in the process. So, just making sure you've got the cushion to be able to take on the work is very important. And then I think, as with any grant or contract grant relationship, making sure that you are servicing the relationship, making sure that you are having open communications, making sure that they understand where you're running into issues or where you might need a little bit of grace in how the funds are utilized, and having that back and forth conversation regularly is super important. One of the lovely things about the Appalachian Council of Governments contract is they have a providers meeting regularly. So we have regular opportunities to have face-to-face time with Tim and his staff.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and that floating cash grant, simply floating cash, can be a huge barrier, especially for small organizations.
And that's something, we kind of stumbled into that in a happy accident kind of situation. But I would encourage organizations to look at the possibility of speaking with some of their family foundations about something similar, because it is a grant that is going to build capacity in perpetuity. It is never going to be spent out. We're always going to be reimbursing those funds.
Absolutely. So Dayle, another question for you, because Tim mentioned that when there's a client interested in home repair services or any of their services, they're doing an assessment. Let's say we know, Tim and team have identified that this person is a great candidate for home repair, and they send that information over to the Rebuild Upstate team. What happens next?
Well, typically when the assessment is done by the Area Agency on Aging, there are very specific things that they list on that approval. So they will specify the things that they have seen that need addressing, as far as, they might need a ramp, or they might need a tub to shower conversion, or a comfort height toilet, or perhaps it's more grab bars through the house or something along those lines. When we go in, we typically are looking at the holistic situation, and there may be other repairs that need to be done in addition to what the AAA has identified for us. So we're going to look at ways that we can layer funding sources to ensure that we are not using AAA funds for something that they are not given for. As Tim said, the things that we're supposed to be doing with those dollars are largely safety related, unless there has been dispensation on the front end to do a little bit more with that. So we try to make sure that if we have those dollars from Appalachian Council of Governments, that we are layering those with other funds that are available, whether it's through a philanthropic grant or whether it's through another contract grant that serves the same area where the resident is. And we try to repair everything that needs repairing versus just the safety issues that might be in the house.
I'm just looking to see, we got
I'll also add that there are plenty of times that people reach out to us first And we might send them to the Appalachian Council of Governments to get the assessment that they need to be able to qualify for their funding.
So Dayle, I know a lot about Rebuild Upstate's programs because I have worked with you for a number of years. But we've mentioned it, but I do want to highlight it. When we started doing work in the Upstate, it was exclusively ramps almost at one point.
Mm-hmm. One
And
ramp, one house.
on our Rebuild Impact call less than 2 months ago, we actually announced 3 distinct program tracks, one of them exclusively focused on aging in place. Can you
Correct.
talk a little bit about how you all have remained focused on aging in place over the years, how maybe programmatically things have shifted, and how key partnerships, got us here exclusively doing ramps, which was aging in place, bringing in critical home repairs, and then recentering back on aging in place in addition to some other work?
Well, in reality, if you look at the history of the organization, more than 70% of the folks that we serve are 60 years of age and above. So we know that a lot of our bread and butter, the work that we do, is for older adults who want to age in place. We also recognized that with the various funding sources that we had enough volunteer groups that we were always looking for ramps, or we were always looking for ways to redo a porch to make it more accessible, or to add railings on it, or things like that. And there was a natural propensity that if we were going to do the ramp, we were going to go ahead and focus on all the repairs for that home. However, when you look at the prioritization criteria across all of our potential homeowners needing repairs, it might be that the ramp is high priority, but the other repairs necessary in that particular home may not quite have the same priority as a repair at another home. Perhaps there's a home out there that desperately needs a new roof because they are at risk of losing the home entirely, whereas we might be doing, a patch of a floor, or something that's still very important, but not as critical in the moment. So by dividing out the different repair tracks that we have, the aging in place, the critical repairs, and those types of things, we are able to try to serve with as much fairness as possible based on the critical needs that are out there for our homeowners.
Definitely. And you sort of mentioned volunteers, and I want to dig into this because I think Rebuild Upstate uses volunteers in a few different ways that's really important to stretching these dollars. So Rebuild Upstate primarily works with local volunteers. You don't have overnight fee-paying volunteers like some of our other members do. So a lot of your volunteer days look like a corporate group during the week, on site by 8, off by 5, or churches on weekends. You'll work with youth groups. And for those, a ramp, a deck, steps, like you mentioned, are really awesome repair projects. But we get into some more elaborate repairs that you can't always have a youth group on site for. And you have some awesome volunteers called the Handyman Club. Can you talk to us about the Handyman Club and how they are really helping in the bathroom conversion space?
Absolutely. Our partnership with the Appalachian Council of Governments is directly responsible for Rebuild Upstate developing our Handyman Club program. Because we were doing so many bathroom modifications, and you can only fit 2 or 3 people in that space at a given time, we were able to attract a few volunteers that were willing to work on a weekly basis or a bi-monthly basis, whatever suited them, to be able to go in and do some of those bathroom projects for us. It started out with one team of 2 guys. And as of today, we have 4 handyman groups in the Greenville area and 2 to 3 handyman groups that are working out of our Anderson County area, which basically puts us in a position to have handyman club teams on site 4 days a week doing projects. Now, In some cases, that might mean that we had a volunteer group out on a Saturday that was working on a ramp, but they didn't quite get it done. And so a handyman team might go out and finish putting the railings on or doing the final touches on that project. But then again, we may have a handyman club that is specifically working on one bathroom in one house repeatedly until they get the work completely done. So they're changing out that tub to a walk-in shower. They're adding that comfort height toilet. They're adding grab bars. They might be redoing the floor because there are soft spots from issues prior to the work being done. They may be changing out the lavatory because that senior has been leaning on the sink when trying to get up or ease down onto the toilet that was too low to begin with. So this relationship has been wonderful because now we have these great weekly and monthly volunteers that are coming and working with us continually throughout the year, and making a huge difference in the amount of work that we're able to accomplish, particularly in bathrooms and buttoning up projects that may not have been completed over a weekend.
Yeah, the Handyman Club, they are a well-oiled machine. It's really impressive to see what they can accomplish together, and
And
they feel like an extension of the staff.
it very much so. And there's one group that started out with 3 really dedicated guys, and I think now they've got upwards of 12 individuals, and they just basically know that they need to have 3 or 4 on site on a given day, and so they choose among themselves which 3 or 4 are available. They're typically on Mondays.
I know we're coming up on a little over 10 minutes left, so I've got a couple more questions, and then we're going to open up for open Q&A from our attendees. I want to talk about program evaluation. We see that as a big thing in nonprofit management. It's something we hear a lot from our funders. Are there any evaluation restrictions with these funds, or, home repair is sort of, you build a ramp, the ramp is there, it's safer for the homeowner. What does program evaluation look like with this partnership?
Well, when we submit for reimbursement to the Appalachian Council of Governments, we've already provided a scope of work of what we're planning on doing in those types of documents, but we provide before and after photographs. We provide the actual ledger of the costs that were associated with the project and receipts that are necessary for that. And we submit everything as a packet to the AAA for reimbursement through their processes. Now, their process is online. We're able, that's something that it used to be we submitted everything to them and they put it all online, but that changed several years ago so that we are submitting online all of the information that they need to be able to provide the reimbursement and to have a feel for the quality of work that is being completed. Additionally, whenever they have presentations that they need to make to their governing bodies, we're always happy to provide before and after photos and testimonials from homeowners and stories about homeowners that might help to better paint the picture of the work that we're able to accomplish with those funds.
And so on our level, we are monitored by the state office. So someone from the state office will come here. They'll look at all of the documentation that's been turned in to make sure we are spending money appropriately. So there's always a check and balance system.
And remind me, is an audit required? Would that be required in order to enter the procurement process? Would an organization? No, okay. Because I know we've got members of all sizes, and so sometimes those bigger audits can be a barrier for some of our smaller members. But that's helpful to know that no audit be required. All right, we got about 10 minutes. This last question is a little self-serving, but Dayle, a few years ago, you had a few staff members go through our certified aging in place specialist cohort, where the coalition actually funded that CAPS certification for a few team members. How have you seen that be beneficial to your program now that it's 2 or 3 years later?
It has been incredibly beneficial in that these project managers, when they're going into the home, their awareness of the things to be looking for to help that homeowner age in place safely. They're just so much more in tune with that and are able to make better recommendations, based on the information they received in that training to ensure that the homeowner is going to be best positioned for aging in place over the longer term.
That's awesome. And I know Megan shared it in the chat box there, but we do have funding for another cohort of CAPS certification that we just announced earlier today. So she shared the link to the info session. Attending this is required if you want to have somebody earn that certification. We've heard really great things about it. If you work with older adults, we really recommend you have someone on your team or multiple someones on your team that pursue that. And I'm going to open it up for Q&A. People can go ahead and put something in the chat or unmute themselves. But is there any final thoughts you want to leave the group? Anything we didn't touch on that you think is really important for people to know?
I think the most important thing is, and we know this with any development of funding sources, you've got to make the contact. You've got to have that opportunity to build the relationship and demonstrate what you are able to accomplish. And even if it means making a cold call to your director for your local area agency on aging, these are good people. They have good hearts. They're wanting to help the older adults in their communities. And if you can enlighten them on the services that you're able to provide, it may not come to fruition immediately, but they will certainly be looking for opportunities to engage with you going forward.
Could I ask Tim one follow-up question? When we talked about this assessment process that residents or clients might have to go through, you didn't mention a time span. Can you kind of pinpoint what is the time span that this takes? Is it, we're having weatherization people, and it's like a year, and it's just the process is so long.
No, once someone contacts our office, we try to put them on a schedule as soon as possible. We cover 6 counties with many different services. In all, we serve around 3,500 clients with tangible services. All of them have to be assessed and reassessed annually. So sometimes it may take us 2-3 weeks to get to them, to assess them, sometimes even a month. But once that process has started, the assessment is entered in real time. It goes to our assessment coordinator, and then our assessment coordinator, if they qualify for whatever service, that is sent over to the provider that same week. So I would, in a good situation, I would say anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, the process is done and the referral is sent over. And then it's up to Dell's team to fit them into their schedule, to have volunteers available for whatever that project may be. So, but we don't have as much red tape as a lot of HUD programs and other grants. Our state unit on aging, we've got a trust factor. I've been here for 15 years and I've been working with Dell and her team for over a decade. So we've got each other's cell numbers. If there's any kind of an issue, we call each other and work out whatever the problem may be. But we try to do it as quickly as possible, especially if someone's like broken a hip or really needs help getting in or out of their home, or their floor has fallen through. We try to make the process as quick as possible.
So, and if I can ask you one more question around the procurement process,
Mhm.
are there certain things that you put the procurement request or the RFP out for procurement about, or is it general? We also provide internet service to seniors in our community. And
We are,
so go ahead, tell me about that process.
well, we are very specific. We know how much funding we have for which programs. You know, when you're dealing with federal and state grants, those grants are for specific, you know, we can't use mill money to pay for minor home repair. So when we send out our RFP, we list where we would like for you to serve, in which counties, and what types of services that we'd like for you to provide. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, so if we're currently providing service, internet service for 864 seniors, but there's some others that we haven't been able to reach. So if your RFP doesn't call for general well-being or something like that, it strictly calls for a specific thing, then no. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Those are great questions. Does anybody else have any questions? You can feel free to unmute yourself or add it to the chat box.
Funny feeling that people may think of questions after this is over. And I will say for myself, I am happy to field questions that you might have, and even reach out to Tim if I need his input on answers.
And anyone's welcome to email me anytime. Even when I'm on vacation, I check my emails. So.
He does.
Well, Dayle and Tim, we really appreciate each of you answering these questions today and really taking the time to go more in detail to partnerships that we don't always get the opportunity to see. And also thank you both for your work to help older adults age in place.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end our recording if I know how. There we go.